Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's 60-minute presentation as part of the Wednesday Rainmaking webinar series by the Women Rainmakers of the American Bar Association's Law Practice Division. This webinar is now being recorded. My name is Gabriella Mim, and I am the Marketing Specialist for the ABA's Legal Technology Resource Center. Questions will be addressed during and after the presentation. Please enter your questions using the questions box in the webinar panel on the right side of your screen. We will try to answer all of your questions, but if we run out of time, there will be space on the evaluation form to ask additional questions. Please note that there is a one-page business development outline that you should download as you will be working on completing the outline during this webinar. The outline can be found in the Handouts tab located under the question box on the right side of your screen. Please assist our Women Rainmakers Committee by taking the time to complete the evaluation, which will be emailed to you at the end of the program. This assists us in developing future programs. We really welcome your input for future programs. Our moderator today is Jeannie Lee. Jeannie is a member of the Women Rainmakers Committee. Jeannie is an attorney, leadership and business development coach who speaks nationally on strategic networking for introverts, negotiation skills for women, communication skills in the workplace, and world-class speaking secrets. She is a contributing chapter author to the Amazon #1 bestseller, World-Class Speaking in Action, and to Marketing Success, How Did She Do That?, published by the American Bar Association. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you all for attending today. We will have about 150 attendees, and you can see on the right-hand side there is a question box, so please go ahead and submit your questions, and we'll address as many as we can during the webinar. The mission of the ABA Women Rainmakers is to educate professional women about marketing and business development, to provide mentoring opportunities for members, and to provide networking opportunities to build personal and professional relationships. You can find up-to-date information on our Rainmaker Women's homepage. Our next Women Rainmakers session will be on March 20th. Become 3 times a better speaker and presenter than you are today. And then on June 20th, we will be speaking about becoming a partner and then what. Today's speaker will be Elizabeth Jolliffe and Marianne Trost. Elizabeth is a business development and career management coach for lawyers. Her expertise as a former Clark Hill partner and commercial litigator for 19 years informs her understanding of her clients' challenges and opportunities. In working with attorneys across the country, from solos to large firms, junior associates to partners, Elizabeth focuses on helping each person get what they want by being more of their very best self. Elizabeth is an active bar leader and practices what she preaches by being very involved with her niche attorney market. Marianne is the Women's Lawyers Coach. She is a nationally recognized trainer, coach, inspirational speaker, and author who works exclusively with women lawyers to help them build their books of business and navigate their careers strategically. Marianne believes that having one's own client base gives women lawyers options they might not otherwise have and creates greater self-determination in their careers. She has worked with over 2,000 attorneys in the U.S. and Canada, teaching them the skills they need to grow their own book of business and guiding them to succeed in whichever way in which they define success.
Thank you, Jeannie. This is Elizabeth. I hope that everybody can hear me well. I'm happy to be here again with Jeannie and Marianne doing this presentation. And the first thing that I would like everyone to do is to pull out, or hopefully you have printed off, the one-page business plan development outline. We call it a one-page template, or that's how I refer to it. And Marianne and I will be walking you through that. The first section is goal setting, and that's what I'm going to talk with you about at this time. And I know from experience, my clients and other lawyers I know will say to me, well, Elizabeth, how do I know what kind of goals I should have? I don't know how to set them for the year. I don't know what's realistic. I don't know what's reasonable. I want to have more clients. I want more business. I want to make partner, yada, yada, yada. But what are these realistic goals for the year? And so what I tell them is I say, in order to know what might be realistic, what you're trying to achieve, let's take a step back and envision, what do you want your law practice to look like a year from now? So in January 2020, what do you want it to look like? And I won't have you take the time now, but I encourage people to envision it, write it down. What do you want your day and your week to look like? What do you want your client base to look like? How many hours do you want to spend a week billing and non-billing? Try to write as descriptive of, as detailed a description of your practice a year from now as you can, and put in all the positives and everything. You might even add more about your personal life too, the balance that you want, and try to get very, very visual about that and what you want your practice to look like. And then take a step back from that and say, to achieve that vision, where do you most need to focus? And this is where you're going to draw your goals. You're going to draw your goals out of, where do you really need to focus most in order to achieve that vision? I am going to just talk to you just for a minute about SMART goals, because I'm sure that all of you are smart and you know about SMART goals: specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-based. People will say, Elizabeth, that's a lot of things to remember. That's too much to remember. Aren't some of these the same? Measurable, specific, aren't they the same? Action-oriented, realistic, and by the way, how do I know what's realistic? What I'd really like you to focus on is setting measurable and time-based goals. And by measurable, I mean put some numbers around it. It might be dollars. It might be numbers of clients. It might be numbers of new referral sources. It might be numbers of presentations that you give in a month or 3 months or in a year. The time-based piece is really easy. Put a date by which you're going to get something done. Just like when you end an effective meeting, you know who's going to do what by when. So when you set goals, know what you're going to do and by when you're going to do it. Now, I recently had a client say to me, well, Elizabeth, I'm not really goal-driven. And setting some goals for the end of the year, that doesn't fire me up. That's a long ways off, especially in the spring, you know, knowing how many hours I have to hit or what my production needs to be by the end of the year. I'm not driven that way. And I said, well, you know, how do you feel about daily goals or weekly goals? And she said, oh, I can kill those things. I can get that done. And I said, well, fine. Let's look at daily and weekly goals. We can set some goals for the end of the year, but really what drives her, what drives many people, is just getting things done now. So even though on this business plan you're going to put some goals for the year, Marianne and I are also going to talk to you about and Marianne will cover the section about taking the action steps to make things happen. And those things are actually goals too. So even if you're one of those people who says, I'm not driven by end of the year goals, but you are driven by getting things done every day or every week, that is fine. That's a time-based goal. In terms of, well, what should my business development goals be? As I mentioned, maybe it's a matter of a number of new clients or new matters from existing clients. Maybe it's a number of new referral sources. Maybe for some of my clients, it's been, they've set a goal around increasing the number of partners for whom they want to do work in their firm. Or it's increasing the number of new contacts in their target market. And maybe, as I said, they don't set that for the end of the year. They set it for 3 months from now. They set a goal for that. Maybe a goal might be increasing the number of testimonials that you have on your website or on Avo or on LinkedIn. Set a specific number there. Maybe, again, it's number of speaking engagements or articles you are going to write. And always remember to add, when are you going to do this? Now, a sort of a non-specific goal that people that I like to encourage people to think about, even though it's not specific, it's becoming a go-to person for something. How do you define what is a go-to person, and how would you measure that? Well, if you've written, for instance, a couple of briefs on a specific article on a specific legal issue, and you get that out there in terms of your target market, you publish it to them, you are getting partners know that you do this in your firm, and then other partners start coming to you and saying, you know, Susan, I know that you know about embezzlement. And then another person comes and says, aren't you the person who knows about embezzlement? Or you put it out there on the firm portal that you're an expert in embezzlement. You can start measuring those, and you've now you're well on your way to becoming a go-to person on embezzlement issues. Those are just some examples of things that you can set some business development goals around. In the time that we have left here, I would like you to take a few minutes, if we have a couple of minutes, and fill out the top section of the business development plan and set some business development goals for yourself. And think back to, if you can, just about like, in order to achieve your vision of what you want your practice to look like a year from now, where do you most need to focus? Is it following up with people? Is it developing one-on-one relationships? Is it getting more referrals? Think about that and then write down some goals there in the top section of the form.
Hi, everyone. This is Marianne. I'm excited to be on the call today. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. While I talk, you may still be working on your goals, but I want to make sure we move forward into the action parts of this plan, because our goal is to have you leave today with a completed skeletal framework of your plan. As Elizabeth mentioned, keep focusing on writing your goals. I'm going to focus on the second part of the one-pager, which is to talk to you about key business development relationships. Because business development, when it comes down to it, is all about relationships, and you've got to have the relationships in order to be able to develop a book of business. Where you draw these relationships can be, they can come from a combination of sources, and depending on your practice, you may have a practice that is, heavily based in referrals. You may have a practice in which you're serving a number of larger clients and they send repetitive work. It's going to vary depending on your practice. But on the slide, I've listed the primary areas where I encourage my clients to look to identify their relationships that they want to take and nurture and grow and cultivate going forward for business development. The rule of thumb is that when you have a relationship, it takes at least 6 to 9 interactions with your relationships in order to bring along the rapport and the trust that's necessary for them to engage when they're hiring you. And later on today, we'll talk about some of the follow-up things you can do to cultivate that. But right now, what I'd like you to do is think about, where are the relationships, the key relationships that you have? Are they your clients? Are they your past clients? Are they referral sources? They can be former colleagues, alumna, people you've met at networking events, people you've interacted with through your organizational memberships. It can be any collection. And that's a lot of people. But for today's purposes, I'd like you to identify 4. Just 4 relationships that you want to take this year and deepen them, move them forward, cultivate them. And when you know specifically who it is that you would like to focus on in the coming year, it doesn't mean it's to the exclusion of everyone else, but it means that you're thinking of them and you're mindful of your particular contacts and where you'd like to see those relationships go, and it will help you save time later on. So in the one-pager, the second section is where I'd like you to just write down your 4 relationships. We'll just take a moment to do that. And those of you who are on the call in 2018, it may be a carryover from 2018. You may be continuing to advance those relationships. And also please know that don't stop at just 4. but 4 is plenty for today. But over time, you're going to want to add 4 more, and then 4 more, and then 4 more. Typically, you'll get the greatest return on investment cultivating relationships where you already have the rapport and trust established, so clients, past clients, referral sources, former colleagues. And so if you're really limited on the amount of time, you're going to want to start with those categories. And then we'll advance the slide and talk about more contacts. If you've come up a little short on your contacts, there are, you can look. A lot of us have contacts in Outlook that have never made it onto our short list. We have emails, addresses of people, distribution lists. You serve on a board and they give you a list and it goes in a folder somewhere, but the names never get translated into your Outlook or into the short list of potential business development contacts. So think about whether you have phone contacts, other people you're engaging with, even opposing counsel. I know many of you have gotten work from opposing counsel. If that's the case, you want to make sure that you continue to cultivate those relationships. Some of you get work through adjusters. Some of you get work through coordination with national counsel. Make sure you're thinking through the broad spectrum of your contacts. And what'll happen is you're going to find that you fall into one of two camps. Either you have way too many relationships and you can't cultivate them all the time, or you don't have enough. And later on, Elizabeth will be talking about some of the strategies and places that you can go to expand your network. But I'm confident all of you have at least 4, and you probably have 40. So let's start with those.
Marianne?
Yes.
What is the common mistake that you see lawyers make when pulling together their contacts?
I think the mistake I see frequently twofold. One is that they're not cultivating the relationships that they have. So they're pulling together contacts and then not taking them deeper enough. So we have them all on a list, but then the list dies. And we're going to talk shortly about things you can do to follow up and keep the momentum going with them. But the other one I see is the assumption that we have to treat all of our contacts equally, and it's just not feasible. It's really important to segment out your top 10 or top 20 contacts and make sure you're spending a good chunk of strategic time thinking about how you can bring those forward and how you can cultivate those. And then recognize that there are other relationships, kind of like a tier 2, where there are people engaged in business, there are people who might be able to refer you to someone, there are people who might be able to make an introduction for you, but you haven't quite figured out how all of those dots connect. You should be spending some time on them, but not as much time as you spend on your top list of clients, your tier 1. And then segmenting out even a tier 3, which are people who you know, but you're not really sure how those dots connect, and it may never lead to anything. Certainly you want to keep them on your list for some periodic follow-up, but you don't want to invest a lot of time in those relationships because there just isn't enough time in the day to cultivate all relationships equally. So the mistake I see is not segmenting out that top 10 and really committing to that top 10 or top 20, and then treating all contacts equally. So let's think about if there are a few more for those of you who may be struggling to find more contacts. Think of service providers, maybe even board members, your holiday card list that your firm keeps. Some of you've got contacts in your memory and it's just that they haven't ended up on the list yet. And social media. I recommend to my clients that every 3 months you go through your social media, your LinkedIn at least, and see if anyone has moved. You would be surprised how many people have taken on a new position, but clicked the option not to broadcast that to their network. And it's important to know where your contacts are because things may change. Many of you have colleagues who are going in-house or switching from one in-house position to another, and it takes some proactive effort in managing your contacts to go through your LinkedIn periodically and see who's moved, who do you want to stay in touch with, and add them to your list as well.
So Marianne, what periodicity are you speaking about? Because anyone who has any kind of presence on LinkedIn, you're always getting LinkedIn messages. So is there a periodicity that you find works well?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So how often should you be checking your LinkedIn? Because LinkedIn always pops up. If you're active on LinkedIn, it pops up daily.
Oh, well, being active on social media, that's actually, I think, I'm trying to think of a quick way to answer that question. But being active on social media, I recommend that people try to get on at least once a week. But if you're a regular user, you can be on daily. But in terms of going into your contacts and checking to see who's there, who do you know, who's moved to a new company, I typically recommend every 3 to 6 months, just to make sure that you are aware of any opportunities that might present themselves because someone's made a change. All right, let's move to the next slide. Okay, and I believe we have covered that slide as well. We're continuing to work on the plan. Now, once you have the relationships identified, it's really important to figure out what action you're going to take, because otherwise it's just going to be a list of names. And so I'm going to give you some different techniques on how to follow up and stay in touch. As I mentioned, you're going to want to strive for 6 to 9 interactions with your contacts so that so you can move them into the trust and rapport stage that's necessary before someone typically will engage for legal services or tell you that they need your help. So when looking for follow-up techniques, you want to pick the ones that typically build the rapport the quickest, and that would be face-to-face contact. Sometimes even going out to lunch with someone, at the end of the lunch, you feel like you know them, you know they have kids, you know what their hobbies are, you feel like you've known them for a long time. You can really move the dial in terms of multiple avenues for connectivity, commonality, and rapport and trust when you're in a face-to-face situation. But in today's world, it's really hard to get that face-to-face. So if you can't get a face-to-face, I suggest making a call, even leaving a voicemail, allows someone to hear your voice, which creates that connection. Now, you may not be able to even reach them in that sense. Sometimes people don't return calls, but at least they've heard that you've called. Whenever I get an invitation for something, I encourage people to think, could you invite someone to participate with you? Could you invite someone to attend with you? Is it something that they would find of value? Really important, though, on follow-up to make sure that it is something of value, because none of us want to be spammed with a whole bunch of information that we have no time to read. So think through your relationships. What are their interests? What would be helpful to them? What have you read recently that applies to their business? What have you read recently that applies to their interests? And use those avenues for connecting. Acts of kindness go a long way also, and that sounds so silly, but I think many of us are inclined to think of the little things, and the little things matter. People remember them. If you wish someone a happy birthday, if you say, I remember that your daughter was applying to college and I know she would have heard by now, I hope that all works out. Or if you know someone is going through an illness, sometimes we know that. You just want to check in and see how they're doing and tell them that you're thinking of them. Just the little acts of kindness are a wonderful way to follow up, but they've got to be sincere. They've got to come from the heart, because just like all of us, we can recognize when something is contrived, and we can recognize when something comes from the heart. So, for example, this morning I emailed one of my clients in Chicago, and I said, "Oh my God, I hope you're staying warm today because I know you can't go outside." And she knows that's authentic because I'm originally from Chicago, but you wouldn't want to be doing, sending someone something, oh my goodness, I heard the hurricane is coming and I hope you're well, if you don't stay in touch with them and they know that that's not part of the way in which you operate. It's got to be authentic to who you are. You can send a link to a blog post. You can send an article of interest. You could send a link to a trade association or a group that you've heard that has resources that this person might be interested in. And how you do this can vary. Certainly you can send, there's some lovely e-cards that you can use if you want to make it just a little bit different. People still appreciate handwritten notes. But the goal is really to stay in touch, not just how are you, how are you, how are you, because that gets old over time, but to serve as a resource, to let your contacts know you're thinking of them, that you care, that you're on the listen for things that might be helpful to their business or to them personally. You want to share opportunities and activities and make sure that's all aligned along interests. Pinging on social media is a very easy way to stay in touch with people, to let them know that you're congratulating them on something that's happened or you applaud them on something they've done. It only takes a minute to do it, and yet when you send it, it goes out to a broad network and reminds people that you're engaged. One technique I would encourage you to take a look at your short list and see if it would apply is it possible to go on site with some of your clients or past clients or potential clients to see how their business functions, where they work, what it's like, to make that little extra effort, and sometimes to coordinate your travel plans if you happen to be in Atlanta or you happen to be in New York and you have some contacts there but you've not met face-to-face or it's been a long time, to offer to meet up while you're traveling or offer to go see them at their location. So what I'd like you to do is think about the action that you would take with each of the 4 names that you put on the piece of paper. What's the next action? And then to Elizabeth's point about making sure that your goals are specific, I want you to think about what is the target date at which I would follow up. So for example, if you know that you would potentially see them at an event that's going to occur in late February, then in mid-February would be your target date, because you'd send them an email and say, I'm so looking forward to seeing you at the upcoming conference. Or if you just saw them or just communicated with them and they said they're going on vacation, and you may want to log when the vacation is over and follow up then and say, I hope you had a fabulous time in Hawaii. The target date should be unique to the particular relationship and to the action that you're taking. So go ahead and take a minute or so to fill in the action and the target date. Now I have to add that people who identify these top 10 or 20 contacts and really cultivate those relationships get so much farther than people who are doing random acts of business development. And if you are super busy and you don't have a lot of time for business development, even cultivating 10 or 20 relationships strategically will get you much farther than a little bit of this, a little bit of that, in a random sense.
Marianne?
Yes.
So we have someone who possibly might be a new associate, and they're wondering what you would recommend, because obviously when you're a new associate, you've got to build those relationships with your practice leaders and other shareholders. Is there something that you think that's probably, if I get this question correctly, that would be most beneficial with the time, very much lack of time during your first years as associates, that are more helpful in business development?
Absolutely. So for first and second years, my recommendation first is to serve your internal clients. Those are the other attorneys in your firm that you're working with. They are going to be creating their first impressions of you, and those impressions are going to last a long time. And it's much easier to create a great impression than it is to unwork one that's not where you want it. So you're going to want to focus on quality work and treating the attorneys that you work with inside your law firm as if they were clients, so they can see how responsive you are, how thorough you are. And you're going to want to get to know them just on the things that I've mentioned in multiple ways, not just in a work context, but what are their interests? What can you connect on so that you can be thoughtful and be mindful and regularly engage with them? But I would also say, if because of the limitations on time, I would segment it out and say, stay in touch with key law school contacts. And the reason for this is there's a huge diaspora. They all go off to other firms. They go off around the country. And if you don't stay in touch during those first couple of years, it's really hard in year 4 or year 5 to say, hey, I haven't thought of you for the last 4 years and I'd like to get in touch. It's not that difficult to stay in touch with your contacts when you're coming right out of law school. And it doesn't take a lot. It can be something as simple as, wanted to send you my V card. I've joined such and such firm. Let me know where you landed. Looking forward to staying in touch. And you can let that go for like 6 months. And then you'd want to follow up and say, wow, I can't believe we're at the 6-month point, wondering how it's going. Look forward to staying in touch. And then you can push that out another 6 months and say, wow, we're at our 1 year. Congratulations. I've decided I really want to focus on this type of law. What kind of law are you focusing on? How's it going? Let's get together. It doesn't have to be very frequent. It just has to be consistent over time so you never lose the momentum. And that's the key, because the start, stop is what it becomes so time consuming. And that's what you want to avoid.
Thank you, Marianne. And now we need to move on to Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you. So some of you may be thinking to yourself, well, thank you very much, Marianne. I now have my four main contacts who I want to develop, and I've got several others, and I have a list, and I have them organized well. But none of those people do anything related professionally to what I do as a lawyer. None of them could I can't even imagine that they could be a referral source. Some of you may be, for instance, in construction litigation. Maybe you're in employment litigation. Maybe you're a patent lawyer, and you look at the 4 people you just identified, and you think about your other contacts, and you think, but none of these people, Marianne and Elizabeth, none of them have anything to do with construction or employment or patent law. Now what do I do? Well, what I would say is you need to fill your pipeline. You need to fill your pipeline with people in your potential target market. And as Marianne said, business development is about relationships. And I always say it's relationship building, and you need to have credibility and visibility, because people do business with people they know, like, and trust. We get our hair cut and styled by people who we know, like, and trust, or who our friends go to, and we like our friends' haircut. We go to dentists, we go to financial planners, we go to the car repair shop, because we have at least gotten a referral to those various service providers because someone else at least knows and likes and trusts them. So that's what we want to do as lawyers, and that's what you want to do as a lawyer. But so going back to, so you're in construction litigation or employment litigation, you're a patent lawyer, you need to fill your pipeline with people who could be potential referral sources for you or potential clients for you. And as you look back at your contacts, you say like, not so much, not very many of those people are in my potential target market, either as a direct potential client or a referral source. So then I'd say like, okay, you need to build your visibility with your target market. Do you want to do that with a strategy that you get in front of them by writing and publishing for your target market? Do you want to do it by speaking for your target market? Do you want to do it by identifying and then getting to know through LinkedIn is a great way to do it, potential people who could be referral sources in your target market, and asking others for introductions to those people. And it's a long, slow road. It really is. Sometimes it might be fast and you might luck out, but it can be a long, slow process. Can you identify a trade or professional organization? Maybe, for instance, if you're in construction litigation, you could look for groups like Women in Construction or the metropolitan area construction professionals, or Women in Real Estate, or just real estate professionals, or if you're in family law, looking for therapists and accountants and other professional service providers. No matter what area of practice you're in, try, for instance, to think of other professional service providers who also service that niche, and get to know those people. It might be you're sending them a cold email. You might do a lot of research on LinkedIn. I think it's a fabulous tool. to identify some people and people who you may know who know people in your potential target market. And that's the way you can start filling your pipeline. These different strategies, however, they all take your resources. They take time, they take energy, and a lot of them take money. If it's one-on-one contact, you're going out to lunch, you're having coffee, you're flying to see someone, you're going to a conference, you're joining a trade organization and going to their annual seminars, you're doing some other kinds of networking, you're taking people to sporting events to get to know them better, you're joining groups. That all takes money, it takes time, and it takes energy. So you only want to just choose a couple. I say 1 to 2, so that you can really maximize those strategies and you can maximize your resources. And then you want to do them consistently and persistently. And again, what you're trying to do, raise your credibility, drastically increase your visibility with your target market, and build those relationships. And I recommend that you pick just 1 or 2 of those strategies and stick with them and then evaluate them. Referral building, some people find it very, very hard. They're like, Elizabeth, I don't want to ask somebody else for business. That makes me feel very uncomfortable. Well, first you have to be in a position to be able to ask. You have to be in a position with somebody where they do know and like and trust you. I never recommend that people just hand out their business cards. That's so awkward, and it's awkward to be on the receiving end of that. You don't hand out your business card until someone asks for your business card.
Elizabeth, just real quickly, we're running a few minutes behind, but if you could kind of summarize I have 2 more questions that have come in. What strategies are more effective than others?
Well, certainly if you can get, as Marianne said, face-to-face contact with people who would be in your target market, including potential referral sources. If you can get to know people one-on-one, that's the most effective, because then people can get to know you and like you and trust you faster. That's not always possible right away, and especially for newer lawyers. But that, of course, is the best. And if you can look at your existing client base or existing contacts that you have and try to build referral relationships there, that is also, that's a speedier way to develop more business. But it really depends on where you are in terms of on the whole timeline. If you're starting from scratch or you already have some business. If you already have some, then you want to look at your current clients and see what you can do from there.
Okay, and then real quickly, because we are trying to get to the top of the hour, is if your law firm is requiring or strongly encouraging you to join a board or write articles, but those are not your strategies that you have chosen yourself for 2019 Business Development Plan, what do you think I should do?
Well, I think you shouldn't say no. You definitely should not say no. I think you should go and talk to someone who's in charge of strongly encouraging that directive, and talk with them and tell them what you do have in mind, and see if you can get their blessing for the strategies that you do have in mind. And if they still want you to join a board and write articles, see how you can make them fit into your plan. I mean, pick the board. You pick the board. Don't let somebody else pick the board. Pick a board that seems to make as much sense to you as possible, that could have people who would be in your target market on it, that could help your credibility and raise your visibility.
Okay, thank you. Marianne?
Yes, I'd like to build on some of the points that Elizabeth had about maximizing your activities. You're going to want to take action, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, but very specific. So for example, if you do join a trade organization, you're going to want to think about not just attending the meeting, but do I have access to becoming a presenter? Do they have a newsletter where I could author an article? Is there a particular committee where my natural skill set would fit and I would enjoy working on it? Would it give me access to potential clients, potential referral sources, introductions that I want? You want to think about how you can build on what you're doing and make sure that you are, the time that you're investing is used as wisely as possible instead of spreading yourself too thin. So for example, when you present something, you want to think about, can I write about it? Because you're already in the zone, you already know the content, you've already presented on it. Is there a way to put it into a 3-paragraph e-alert that your firm could send out? Or a series of, part 1, part 2, part 3 that of a very short article that could be posted, or a blog post of some sort. Turning your speaking into your writing, turning your writing into your speaking, and aligning your natural skill set when you're serving on a committee and picking a committee. If you're the kind of meet and greet person, then you want to be on a membership committee. You want to be on committees where you're reaching out to invite speakers to come and speak in an organization so that you can be their first point of contact. If your natural skill set is aligned along finances, you want to be on committees that allow you to use that skill set without having to do any preparation before you even walk into a meeting, because it comes so naturally to you to look at a cash flow, or to look at budget, or to be able to make recommendations on good financial best practices. In terms of getting the most return on your business development effort, as Elizabeth mentioned, it's consistency over time. The start, stop is what kills you. And because then you have to find a way to get back in touch with a person. You have to find a context. You have to think about, what am I going to say? How am I going to explain this? What do we have in common? I haven't talked to them in 6 months. You don't want to get to that place. You want to keep the momentum going. And as I said, it can just be an interaction every 2 or 3 months. It doesn't have to be a lot. In fact, it shouldn't, or, come off as being, stalking or something. But you want it consistently over time. If you can schedule even 15 minutes a day and you put it on your calendar, there may be days, certainly if you're in trial, when you just delete it because you know what, you don't have time. You don't have 15 minutes that day. But there are many days when we actually do have 15 minutes. And many of my clients find that if they just write that down on their calendar, they're at least reminded that they need to take action now, 15 minutes, and be done with it. Let's see. Other ways of maximizing is remembering that every interaction you have on the phone is a type of business development. You're cultivating rapport, you're cultivating trust, you're elevating that likability. So make sure that you're acknowledging every call that comes in, make sure that you're responding promptly to emails. That sounds so fundamental, but the very best rainmakers realize that every interaction with another contact, whether it's a referral source or a client or a potential client, is business development. So in your strategies, in your actions, the section that's highlighted on the slide right now, I want you to go ahead and think about, where are you currently engaged? Is it an organization? Are you doing a presentation? And think about, what can you do in order to maximize that? Can you turn your speaking into writing? Can you co-author something with a potential referral source or a past potential client so that you have a chance to get to know them better? Can you serve on a committee in a way that uses your natural strengths so it's not a time suck and it doesn't drain your energy? How can you do things that are consistent with who you authentically are and do it in such a way that you get more value out of it than if you were just to simply show up? So take a moment to just write that in.
Elizabeth?
Yes, I'm here. Okay. Just talking for 2 minutes here, basically, right, Jeannie, about support and barriers. So I tell people, first of all, identify the personal keys to your business development success. What is going to make the difference? And if you've been practicing a while, what has made the difference for you? And keep going with your strengths. If you haven't been practicing that long, start to realize, where are you at your best? Do you need to stay visible to your target market? Is that going to be the key? Is being active with a certain group going to be the key? Is getting more testimonials going to be the key? You may know the answers to these already, but if you're a fairly new lawyer, you may not know. But stay aware, and keep an eye out for what is going to be and what starts to look like the personal key to your business development success. And then think about, what support do you need to achieve your goals? Look at your administrative assistant. Think about other people within your firm or some close friends. Maybe it's your significant other or a parent. Who can you enlist to support you? Talk with them about your business development goals and see who can help you. Don't be afraid to share with other people, and you'll be amazed how much they will be willing to help you. How can you spend your business development budget, whether you're a solo or you're in a firm? Think about the dollars you have and be strategic in terms of spending those dollars as well. Don't do, as Marianne also cautioned you, don't do random acts of lunch. Don't do random acts of marketing. Think back to this plan, look at this plan, pull it out and say, how am I going to spend my business development budget to help me achieve my goals, and take these daily and weekly actions, do these strategies, contact those people, and get closer to my ideal practice that I want. In terms of barriers, how do you get in your own way? You know what? So many of us, we do get in our own way. We don't say no to the internet. We don't say no to the fires that people come to us with, whether they're our clients or our colleagues. There are ways to say, yes, I'd love to help you. Can I come see you at 2 o'clock this afternoon? Yes, I'd love to help you on that. If I can meet with you tomorrow, will that work for you? See, these are ways to say no, but you're still starting with a yes. And this is keeping you from getting in your own way by always saying, yes, I'll drop everything I have right now this second for you. And then think to yourself, what do you need to say yes to? Instead of saying no, what do you actually need to say yes to? Say yes to creating time for yourself. Say yes to the potential new client that scares you a little bit because it's a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but you know what, you're smart, you passed the bar, you graduated from law school, you've got a lot of good people around you, whether they're within your firm or they're just your friends in the bar. You can say yes to some of those potentially, new matters that make you a little bit nervous if you believe that you have the support around you that I just talked about. So realize that we do sometimes get in our own way and identify those things. It might even be fear. Maybe fear is getting in your way. I say name your fear, face it, and get on with it. Get on with what you want to do, and don't let fear stop you. Realize what it is and take a look at it and think about what's the worst that can happen and decide whether you can move on from there. So those are the kinds of things that I know I've talked about with lawyers over the last 11 years is how do we get in our own way and what can we say yes and no to. So on the sheet, there are sections there in those questions. What do you have to say no to? What do you have to say yes to? How can you spend your money? What support do you need? If you didn't have time to fill these things out today, I do suggest strongly that you go through that and really sit down and take some time and think about that closely, because that kind of self-reflection is very valuable.
I think I had a question from someone who said, could we go back to slide 32 for a moment? Would you like me to do that now, or I will email them later? They said they didn't have the time to write down all your points.
Sure, let's go back.
Okay, let's see here. Because if she is in that position, maybe there are others. And
Action
those
step.
who don't need to go back to 32, go ahead and take a moment to work on that piece of a commitment that Elizabeth was just talking about.
I can't help myself.
How much time? Okay, here's some questions while they're looking at slide 32. How much time should I be spending on my business development efforts? That's from Marianne.
Wow. That is a tough question because it varies by person. I think it also varies depending on where you're at in your career. But I'll give you some benchmarks, which is statistically, they say that it takes about a half an hour a day to maintain a book of business that you already have. It takes about an hour a day to grow one. And it takes about 2 hours a day to really aggressively grow one. Now, 10 hours a week of business development is a lot of time for some of us. So you have to gauge yourself. I think it's more about the quality of what you do than the amount of time that you spend on it. If you capitalized on all the relationships and everything you've done and said on this piece of paper and never lost the momentum in 2019, you would be farther along than someone who spent 10 hours a week doing random acts of business development, start, stop, losing momentum, not connecting, not serving as a resource. But recognize that this is a marathon. It takes years to cultivate a client base. And starting early, even for the person who asked the question, is a first year. It's great you are starting early. The earlier you start, the better. You will get there in time.
So Marianne, I'm sorry, I got 1 hour to grow one, 2 hours to aggressively grow one. What was the first time period that you gave?
It was a half an hour just to maintain the one you already have, to maintain a book where you're not even out building a book.
Okay. Next question for Elizabeth. I want to build a book of business, but I'm too busy to write. I'm too busy to write articles or do lunches or develop a niche. How can I find the time for business development? I think I understand the question. I want to build a book. I'm too busy.
Build a book. Well, that's some people would say, well, it's a good problem to have. You have so much work that you don't have to think about building a book. But we do know, I mean, that person knows, obviously, because she's asking the question. We do know you do need, generally, almost everybody does need to build a book, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, realistically, you've got to carve out a little time, whether you call it a marketing minute a week, and really I don't mean a minute by that, but you may not have the half hour a day. I'd say take a look at what you are doing now, where you're spending all your time, and what is the work product that you're producing, and how can you repurpose that? Maybe it's even just putting very short little posts up on LinkedIn based on some research. If you are a litigator and you've done a brief recently, maybe LinkedIn isn't the place for that, because you're not targeting a very specific market there. But think about the work you're already doing, and say you have written some briefs, and a couple times you've focused on one issue. Can you boil it down to some essential paragraph, and can you repurpose that and use it somewhere? And this would take, and I'm happy to talk to this person or whoever afterwards or some other time, but I'd say really take what you are doing, where you are spending your time, and think about how can you repurpose it? How can you reuse it? How can you take your work product, the knowledge, the expertise, whatever it is that you have now, and really use that to help you build your business, even though you don't have time to go speak on it, to develop a big PowerPoint, and to develop a 45-minute talk, and you don't have time to take people out for an hour lunch every day. You do have some expertise and some work product now, and I'd say look closely at that and think about where else can you use that. Can you send it out in just a couple of email blasts to 5 people who might be interested? Can you use that to stay on somebody's radar screen? Does that make sense?
It does. So for each of you, just one thing as you've heard the webinar go on this morning that really stuck out that you'd like to be sure that people heard. Marianne first.
I actually wanted to build on what Elizabeth just said. Can I do that?
Of course.
Which is, I think when we're strapped for time, it's really important to figure out where does the work come from, and make sure you know where are your potential clients, where are your referral sources, where do they gather, and how can you make sure you're spending time doing things where you're actually engaging in interaction with them, and doing it in such a way where you're aligning it with your own personal strengths and your own personal style. Because different books are built in different ways, and if you don't know where your potential clients are and you don't know where your work has come from, ask someone who has a book like the one you want to build. and you don't have to develop the book in the same way, but you do need to be where those potential clients are going to be. You do need to line yourself up for, to connect the dots. So for the person who asked the question, I don't have time to write articles, there are certain of you on this call who should not be writing articles because your clients and potential clients are not reading articles. You want to make sure you're at wherever your potential clients are at, and you're doing things that allow you to engage with them as your top priority.
Okay, Elizabeth, one thing that you wish everyone to take away?
I think get very specific about your target market so that you don't do random, you don't waste your time, energy, and money on random acts of marketing. And if you don't know who your target market is, who would you like them to be, and figure out how can you get in front of them. I really think being strategic about it and thinking about your specific target market so that you don't waste your resources. So I think that's very important. I see so many people get burned out because they think they're doing marketing and they're not. It's all very random. And I completely agree with what Marianne just said about looking at who do you do work for currently. And maybe you're a junior associate and you were just so busy and you're billing 2,200 hours a year and you have no control over your assignments and you're just giving them, and you work and you don't really want to write articles and you don't have time to speak or do any of those other things. Well, do you like the work that you're doing? And are there people who are similarly situated who are at the companies that you're working for or the organizations that you're doing the work for? And if you don't have contact with them, I'd say talk with your colleagues to see, could you get a little bit more exposure to people who are your peers at those companies, and see if you can get permission to develop some relationships that way.
Okay.
I agree, because your peers are going to advance as you advance. So you may not have access to the CEO because the senior managing partner does, but you will have access to others in a legal department. Remember, they will grow and become decision makers as you do, and they will be in a position at some point to refer you work.
Okay, I want to thank Marianne and Elizabeth, and I hope you all enjoyed our webinar. We just have a few things to be sure that you announce. I am Jeannie Lee. I understood that some of our slides didn't come out at the very beginning, and I am the chair of the Women Rainmakers webinars. If you have any ideas of what you would like to see in the future, please do email us, and it's very important to us that you stay on the line at the end, and you will be getting a survey on today's webinars and be able to comment. For our next webinar, we are going to be speaking about Become 3 times a better speaker and presenter than you are today. And then on June 20th, we're going to be speaking about now that you've become partner or becoming a partner, and then what?